Parents kicked me out because of my sister's pregnancy. Now they're reaching out a year later to mend things, but I've moved on. The whole mess started when my sister announced she was pregnant at 19. I was 21 at the time, working part-time while going to community college and living at home to save money. Our parents had always been the traditional type, big on family values and appearances in our small town outside of Phoenix. When she dropped the news during Sunday dinner, you could have heard a pin drop. What made it worse was that she refused to tell anyone who the father was. Not a word, just kept saying it was complicated and she'd handle it herself. My parents were mortified. Here they were, pillars of the community, and their youngest daughter was pregnant with no wedding ring and no boyfriend in sight. The whispers started immediately in our neighborhood. I tried to stay out of it at first, figured it was between them and none of my business, but living in that house became like walking through a minefield. Every conversation turned into an argument about responsibility and shame. My mom would cry at the dinner table. My dad would storm off to his workshop and bang around with his tools for hours. Then one evening, everything changed. I was in my room studying when I heard my sister on the phone in the hallway. She was whispering, but the walls were thin. I caught fragments of what she was saying, something about keeping quiet and how nobody could know. My curiosity got the better of me and I pressed my ear against the door. That's when I heard her say my name. She was telling whoever was on the other end that I was getting suspicious and asking too many questions. My blood went cold. I wasn't asking any questions at all. In fact, I'd been going out of my way to avoid the whole situation. The next morning, I confronted her, asked her straight up why she mentioned my name in her phone call. She got defensive immediately, claimed I was imagining things and that I was just trying to cause more drama. But I knew what I heard. Something was off about the whole situation and somehow I was being dragged into it. 2 days later, my parents called me downstairs for what they called a family meeting. They sat me down in the living room, both of them looking more serious than I'd ever seen them. My sister was there too, sitting in the corner with her arms crossed, refusing to make eye contact with me. My dad started talking about how disappointed they were in both of us. I had no idea what he was talking about. Then my mom joined in, saying how they'd raised us better than this and how we'd brought shame to the family name. I kept asking what I had done wrong, but they just kept talking in circles about responsibility and consequences. Finally, my sister spoke up. She looked right at me and said I knew exactly what I'd done, that I was just as guilty as she was and that I needed to stop pretending to be innocent. My parents nodded along like they understood something I didn't. I was completely lost. I had no idea what anyone was talking about. I asked directly what I was being accused of, but nobody would give me a straight answer. The whole conversation felt like some kind of weird theater where everyone had a script except me. Then my dad dropped the bomb. He said they decided that both my sister and I needed to take responsibility for our actions. That meant she would stay home to prepare for the baby, and I would need to find somewhere else to live. Immediately. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was being kicked out for something I had no part in, something nobody would even explain to me. When I protested, my mom said they'd made their decision and it was final. I had until the end of the week to pack my things and leave. The next few days were a blur of confusion and panic. I tried talking to each of them separately, hoping someone would finally tell me what was really going on. My parents just kept saying I knew what I'd done and that they were too disappointed to discuss it further. My sister avoided me completely. I started thinking maybe I was losing my mind. Had I done something and somehow blocked it out? Was there some conversation or incident I'd forgotten about? I went through every interaction I'd had with my sister in the past few months, trying to figure out what could have possibly connected me to her pregnancy. Then on my last night in the house, I overheard my parents talking in their bedroom. They were discussing how hard this was on them, having to choose between their children. My mom said something about wishing there was another way, but that they couldn't let me stay after what I'd done to my sister. That's when it clicked. They thought I was the father of my sister's baby. The realization hit me like a truck. My own parents believed I had gotten my sister pregnant. No wonder they wouldn't explain what I'd supposedly done. No wonder the conversations had been so vague and uncomfortable. They couldn't bring themselves to say it out loud. I wanted to storm into their room and clear everything up immediately. But then I stopped. How do you even begin to defend yourself against an accusation like that? How do you prove something didn't happen when everyone has already made up their minds? Instead, I packed my bags and left the next morning without saying goodbye. I couldn't face any of them. The whole situation was too messed up to deal with. I figured they'd realize their mistake eventually when the truth came out. I found a small apartment across town and picked up extra shifts at work to cover the rent. It was rough financially, but at least I was away from the toxic atmosphere at home. I threw myself into my studies and work, trying to forget about the whole nightmare. Months went by without any contact from my family. I'd see my dad occasionally at the grocery store, but he'd turn away when he spotted me. My mom stopped going to places where she might run into me. It was like I'd become invisible to them. My sister had the baby in the spring. I heard about it through mutual friends, but nobody told me directly. I didn't even know if it was a boy or girl. Part of me wanted to reach out to try to reconnect with my family, but I was still hurt and angry about how everything had gone down. Then, about 6 months after the baby was born, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was my sister. She said she needed to talk to me and asked if we could meet somewhere private. I was hesitant, but curiosity got the better of me. We met at a coffee shop on the other side of town. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in weeks. The baby was with her, a little girl with bright eyes and chubby cheeks. For a moment, I forgot about all the drama and just focused on how beautiful my niece was. My sister started talking immediately, like she'd been rehearsing what to say. She told me she was sorry for everything that had happened, that she'd made a huge mistake and that our parents had gotten the wrong idea about things. She said she'd tried to correct them multiple times, but they wouldn't listen. Then she told me the real story. The father of her baby was actually our cousin from our mom's side of the family. He was married with kids of his own, living in another state. They'd had an affair during a family reunion the previous summer, and when she found out she was pregnant, she panicked. She couldn't tell our parents the truth because it would have destroyed multiple families. Our cousin's wife was also our mom's favorite niece, someone she'd practically raised after her own mother died. The scandal would have torn the extended family apart. So she kept quiet about the father's identity, hoping to figure out a solution. But when our parents started pressuring her for answers, she'd made an offhand comment about how at least it wasn't someone in our immediate family. Somehow, that had gotten twisted in their minds. They'd started watching us more closely, looking for signs of some inappropriate relationship. When they saw us talking privately or spending time together, they'd interpreted it as evidence of their suspicions. The phone call I'd overheard was actually her talking to our cousin, trying to convince him to step up and take responsibility. By the time she realized what our parents were thinking, it was too late. They'd already made up their minds. She'd tried to tell them the truth, but they thought she was just trying to protect me. The more she denied it, the more convinced they became that something was going on between us. I sat there listening to all of this, feeling a mix of relief and rage. Relief that I finally understood what had happened. Rage that my own parents could think so little of me, that they'd been willing to kick me out based on their own twisted assumptions. My sister begged me to forgive her, said she'd been young and scared and had made terrible decisions. She wanted to tell our parents the truth now, but she was afraid of what it might do to the family. She also admitted that part of her had been relieved when they'd focused their anger on me instead of her. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to forgive her immediately. She was my little sister and she'd been in an impossible situation. But another part of me was furious that she'd let me take the blame for something I had nothing to do with. I told her I needed time to think about everything, that I appreciated her finally telling me the truth, but that I wasn't ready to jump back into the family drama. She said she understood and gave me her new phone number in case I changed my mind. Over the next few weeks, I found myself thinking about that conversation constantly. I was angry at my sister for letting me get kicked out, but I was even angrier at my parents for believing the worst about me without even asking for my side of the story. Then about a month later, I got a call from my mom. She was crying on the phone, saying how sorry she was and how they'd made a terrible mistake. Apparently, my sister had finally told them the truth about the baby's father. They wanted me to come home to forgive them and be a family again. But here's the thing, I didn't want to go back. The past year had been hard, but it had also been liberating. I'd learned to stand on my own 2 feet. I'd made new friends, found a rhythm to my life that didn't involve constant family drama. I'd even started dating someone, a girl from my college who didn't know anything about my family situation. When I told my mom I wasn't interested in coming home, she was shocked. She said they'd learned their lesson and that things would be different now. But I'd heard that before. Besides, the damage was already done. They'd shown me exactly what they thought of me when the chips were down. My dad called a few days later with a similar message. He was more awkward about it, clearly uncomfortable with having to admit he'd been wrong. He offered to help me with college expenses to make up for the lost time, but I'd already figured out how to pay for school myself. I didn't need their help anymore. The calls and texts continued for several weeks. My sister would send me pictures of the baby, trying to guilt me into coming around. My parents would alternate between apologies and subtle demands that I stop being stubborn and come home, but I'd made up my mind. I wasn't cutting them off completely. I was willing to have a relationship with them, but on my terms. I'd see them occasionally, maybe come to family dinners once in a while. But I wasn't moving back home, and I wasn't pretending that everything was fine. The hardest part was explaining the situation to my girlfriend. She couldn't understand why I wouldn't just forgive my family and move on. She came from a close-knit family herself and couldn't imagine staying angry at her parents over what she saw as a misunderstanding. But it wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a fundamental breakdown of trust. My parents had been so quick to believe the worst about me that they'd thrown me out without even having a real conversation about it. They'd chosen their version of events over their own son. As time went on, I realized that being kicked out might have been the best thing that ever happened to me. I'd been comfortable at home, maybe too comfortable. I might have stayed there for years, never really growing up or taking responsibility for my own life. Now I had my own place, my own routine, my own sense of independence. I was doing better in school because I had to. I was more confident in my relationships because I'd learned to trust my own judgment. I discovered that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. My parents kept reaching out but less frequently as the months passed. They'd invite me to family gatherings and sometimes I'd go, but it was always awkward. They'd try too hard to include me to make up for lost time. I'd be polite but distant and everyone could feel the tension. My sister and I developed a weird relationship. We'd text occasionally, mostly about the baby. She'd share updates and photos and I'd respond with appropriate comments. But we never talked about what had happened between us. It was like we'd agreed to pretend it never occurred. The baby was walking now, starting to talk. She was adorable, and I felt bad that I wasn't really part of her life. But I also knew that getting too involved would mean getting sucked back into the family drama. I wasn't ready for that. My girlfriend and I had been together for almost 8 months when she brought up the subject of meeting my family. She'd introduced me to her parents early on, and they'd welcomed me with open arms. Now she wanted to return the favor. I tried to explain why that wasn't a good idea, but she didn't really understand. She thought I was being petty and holding onto old grudges. She said families fight and make up all the time and that I was being unreasonable. The conversation turned into our first real fight. She accused me of being emotionally unavailable and unwilling to work through problems. I accused her of not understanding what I'd been through and trying to force me into a situation I wasn't comfortable with. We didn't talk for a week after that fight. During that time, I did a lot of thinking about what I really wanted from life. Did I want to keep my family at arm's length forever? Was I being too stubborn, or was I protecting myself from people who had already hurt me once? When my girlfriend and I finally talked again, we both apologized. She said she'd been pushing too hard and didn't fully understand my situation. I said I'd been defensive and hadn't explained things clearly. We decided to take things slow and see how they developed. Around that time, my mom called with news that rocked me. Our cousin, the actual father of my sister's baby, had gotten divorced. His wife had found out about the affair and the baby. The whole extended family was in chaos, with people taking sides and relationships falling apart. My mom was devastated. Her favorite niece was heartbroken and angry, and she blamed my sister for destroying her marriage. There were lawyers involved now, custody battles, and demands for financial support. The quiet family secret had exploded into a public mess. Part of me felt vindicated. This was exactly what my sister had been trying to avoid by keeping quiet. But it had happened anyway just a year later. All that secrecy and lying had been for nothing. My parents called a few days later, asking if I'd come home to help deal with the family crisis. They said they needed all hands on deck, that this was bigger than our personal problems. I told them I'd think about it. That night I realized something important. I didn't feel angry anymore. I wasn't holding on to resentment or plotting revenge. I was just done. Done with the drama, done with the secrets, done with trying to fix relationships that might be broken beyond repair. I called my parents back and told them I was sorry about what was happening with the extended family, but that I wasn't coming home to help manage it. This wasn't my crisis to solve. I'd been pushed out of the family when it was convenient, and I wasn't going to be pulled back in just because they needed extra support. My mom cried on the phone. My dad got angry and accused me of being selfish. But I stayed calm and repeated that I was building my own life now and that I wished them well in dealing with their problems. The extended family drama continued for months. I heard updates through mutual friends, but I tried to stay out of it. My sister was apparently struggling with the stress of it all. The baby's father was fighting for custody, and there were questions about child support and visitation rights. Meanwhile, my own life was getting better and better. I'd gotten a promotion at work, my grades were improving, and my relationship with my girlfriend was stronger than ever. We'd moved in together and she'd stopped pushing me about my family situation. One day, almost exactly a year after my parents had first reached out to apologize, I got a text from my sister. She said she was thinking about moving away, starting fresh somewhere else. She asked if I'd meet her one more time before she left. I agreed, mostly out of curiosity. We met at the same coffee shop where we'd had our first conversation after everything fell apart. She looked different, older somehow. The baby was bigger now, talking in full sentences and running around the coffee shop. My sister told me she'd finally realized how much damage her decisions had caused, not just to me but to everyone in the family. She said she'd been selfish and cowardly and that she was sorry for everything. She didn't expect me to forgive her, but she wanted me to know that she understood what she'd done wrong. Then she told me something that surprised me. She said she'd always looked up to me, even when we were kids. That I'd been the responsible one, the one who did the right thing even when it was hard. She said watching me build a new life for myself had shown her what real strength looked like. I thanked her for saying that, but I told her I didn't need her approval anymore. I'd learned to validate myself, to trust my own judgment about what was right and wrong. I said I hoped she'd find happiness wherever she decided to go, but that I was focused on my own path now. She nodded like she understood. Before she left, she asked if she could send me updates about the baby from time to time. I said that would be fine, but that I wasn't ready to be more involved than that. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for a long time, thinking about how much had changed over the past year and a half. I'd gone from being a dependent kid living at home to a self-sufficient adult with my own place, my own relationship, and my own sense of direction. The whole experience had been painful, but it had also been transformative. I'd learned that I could survive on my own, that I didn't need my family's approval to be happy. I discovered reserves of strength I didn't know I had. My parents still called occasionally, usually around holidays or family milestones. The conversations were pleasant but superficial. They'd ask about my life, I'd give brief updates, and we'd both pretend that everything was normal. But we all knew it wasn't. I didn't hate them anymore. I'd moved past anger into something more like indifference. They were people I'd once been close to, but that felt like a long time ago. I wished them well, but I didn't need them in my life anymore. My girlfriend and I got engaged the following spring. I called my parents to tell them the news, and they were excited. They asked if they could meet her, if they could be involved in the wedding planning. I said maybe, but that we were keeping things small and simple. In the end, we had a small ceremony with just a few close friends. My parents weren't there not because I was trying to hurt them, but because they didn't feel like family anymore. They were people from my past, not part of my present or future. Looking back, I can see that getting kicked out was a blessing in disguise. It forced me to grow up faster than I might have otherwise. It taught me that I could rely on myself, that I didn't need anyone else's approval to be happy. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if my parents had just talked to me directly about their suspicions instead of assuming the worst. If they'd given me a chance to defend myself, to explain my side of things. Maybe we could have worked through it together. But that's not what happened. They chose to believe a story they'd created in their own minds rather than trust their own son. And that choice had consequences that couldn't be undone. I'm not bitter about it anymore. I'm actually grateful. That experience taught me who I really was and what I was capable of. It showed me that I could build a life on my own terms without depending on anyone else for support or validation. My sister did move away to another state where she could start fresh. She sends me pictures of the baby occasionally, and I respond with appropriate comments. But we're not really in each other's lives anymore, and that's okay. Sometimes I think about reaching out to my parents, about trying to rebuild some kind of relationship with them. But then I remember how quickly they'd been willing to throw me away, and I realize that I'm better off without that kind of uncertainty in my life. I've built something better now, a life based on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. I've learned to surround myself with people who believe in me, who give me the benefit of the doubt when problems arise. I've learned that family isn't just about blood relations, it's about the people who choose to stand by you when things get tough. My parents reached out to me recently, asking if I'd consider coming to a family reunion this summer. I told them I'd think about it, but honestly, I probably won't go. I've moved on from that chapter of my life, and I'm not interested in going backwards. The person I am now is stronger, more independent, and more confident than the person I was when I lived at home. I've learned to trust my own judgment, to stand up for myself, and to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Getting kicked out was the worst thing that happened to me at the time, but it turned out to be exactly what I needed to become the person I was meant to be. Sometimes the most painful experiences are the ones that teach us the most about ourselves and what we're truly capable of achieving.